I would like to acknowledge that this video is being filmed on the traditional lands of the Wurrundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander or First Nations people who may be watching this video today. Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner, and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a Books Beside My Bed video for you where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading. This is my reading week from the 3rd until the 8th of April. I read a total of 8 things, 2,249 pages, and my yearly reading total is 159 books. The first book that I read this week was Kink Hunted by Adriana Anders. This is the first book in her new series. I also read the bonus epilogue that you get access to when you finish the book. It is a really fun story. It is set in a kink camp, and if you read the author's note at the beginning of the book, Adriana Anders actually talks about her own experiences attending kink camp, so there is a level of authenticity and knowledge to put behind this book, so it definitely has that feel. The book itself, and I want to say this before I start talking about the actual plot of the book itself feels like a big welcoming community, and there's a lot of joy in there. There's a lot of really larger than life characters, and I really loved it. I really want to get to know more of these characters after reading the book. We open the book with our heroine Grace, who is standing at a notice board inside a cafe on the kink camp grounds. It's her first time there, and she's looking at this notice board, and there is a note on the board that says something like, wanted for one evening, partner to be chased in the woods, blah blah blah, one night only, no repeats, no names. So it's going to be a totally anonymous experience. And up until this point, she didn't realize that this was her thing, and she can't tear her eyes off this note. And in the end, she takes down the note, and, you know, it's all planned out that she will participate in this scene. That night, she's involved in the scene. She's chased through the woods by this guy, and, you know, all the way leading up to it, there's people, there's security around who are close enough to help if something goes wrong, but, you know, not involved in the scene. You know, she's chased by this guy that she has never seen. She doesn't know his name. She doesn't know when he's going to come for her. So there's that anticipation that's built up. And after it's done, she cannot get this encounter out of her head. Like, it's stuck on repeat. In the end, she goes back and she puts up her own note on the board that asks for a repeat, despite the fact that, you know, initially it said no repeats. We come to meet the hero, and his name is Lev, and he's one of the founders of this particular kink camp, and he's a widow, and he and his wife and their friends had started it. And we find out that a few years previously his wife had passed away from cancer, and he still lives on the grounds, and he participates in the kink camp with this, you know, one night offer that he puts out every year, but, you know, or every kink camp, but that's it. Like, he's not interested in finding another partner. He's not interested in interacting with all of the other participants in the camp. He has a couple of close friends that he does sort of come down and see, but for the most part he lives in a cabin just on the edge of the grounds, and that's where he stays. And yet he's entirely intrigued by Grace, and it's, you know, their story goes from there. It is very kinky. It is extremely steamy. There are lots of different kinks that are talked about for different characters, and as I said, they're all very larger than life and really engaging and fun, and I'm very much looking forward to reading further books in this series. Then I read or reread Wolfsong by TJ Klune. This is the first book in the Green Creek series, and it's one of my all-time favorite series, but, you know, bring your tissues along because this book packs an emotional wallop. This is the story of Ox, who is our main protagonist, the character who we see the entire story through his eyes. And we find out that growing up, his father told him that he would never really amount to anything and that people would never really understand him. And he's sort of taken that to heart. And yet when he's, I think, 16 years old, he's walking home on the road, heading towards his house, and there in the middle of the road is this 10-year-old boy called Joe. Joe just starts talking to him. He's never met Ox. Ox has never met him. Joe's family has just moved back into the house at the end of the lane on Ox's street. Joe's talking a mile a minute. He's known Ox his entire life, and he's just enamored with Ox. And we find out that Joe is the youngest son of the Bennett family, and that there has been something traumatic that has happened to him in the past, and he hasn't actually spoken to anyone up to this point for months, and yet the first person he speaks to is Ox. And we know that they have this connection. We find out that the Bennetts are a werewolf pack and that they are basically werewolf royalty, and as Ox becomes closer to the family, we begin to understand different things, and we, the reader, know that there is some kind of bond between Joe and Ox. And yet nothing happens because there's an age gap. Joe is still really young, but the family's willing to let this play out the way that it needs to as they grow up. And when Joe is finally of age, something happens that leaves him the alpha of the werewolf pack, and he and his brothers go off on this trek to find the people responsible for a tragedy that befalls the family, leaving Ox behind with Joe's mother and Joe's uncle, and to deal with the fallout of that. And they're gone for years. So this book spans, over a decade of this connection between these two men. And by the time Joe comes back when he's in his early 20s, things have changed. Like, his experiences have changed him, and Ox's experiences have changed him. And they have to find a way to navigate that, and whether or not that bond that exists between them can survive the separation that they've experienced. And it is just an amazing book. I cannot actually put into words how much this book affects me when I read it. So I'm planning on picking up the next 3 books and reading them back to back in the next little while, so you'll hear more about the series. Then I picked up The Hellions, Waltz by Olivia Waite. This is the 3rd book in the Feminine Pursuit series. It is a sapphic historical romance series, and while I've previously loved all the other books, this one didn't do quite as much for me. This is about Sophie, who has recently moved to a small town in England. They've left London because their family was scammed by a con artist, and they've had to move out of London because they basically lost everything. She ends up coming across a woman named Maddie, and she suspects that Maddie is up to no good, and she eventually finds out that Maddie is actually running a scam, but instead of it being on an innocent person, it is on a man who is known for some very dodgy business practices. And eventually Sophie becomes involved in helping Maddie pull off this scheme. It's fun for what it is, but I feel like we didn't spend enough time with Maddie and Sophie to make their relationship feel really natural. A lot of it felt a little bit forced, but also we don't see them a lot, so it's kind of hard to know where that line is. But I do continue to enjoy Olivia Waite, and I'd be interested to see what she comes out next with in this particular series. Then I read Engaging the Enemy by Reese Ryan. This was one of the picks from my spinner wheel. This is the 3rd book in her Bourbon Brothers series, and I haven't read the other 2 books, but it is about Parker, who is the youngest son of a family that has a bourbon empire, and he is determined to prove that he is worthy of being the heir to that empire, despite being the youngest son. And he sets off trying to acquire some land that his father would like to attain in order to start a restaurant chain for his wife. And it just so happens that this land is currently occupied by Kaylee Jamison, who crafts jewelry, and she is not willing to sell to him, and she keeps making him hike up the price for the property. And then she also gets him to agree to being her fake boyfriend to the wedding of her former fiance's sister, who has asked her to attend the wedding. As it turns out, both Parker and Kaylee know each other from the past. They were friends. Something happened between them, and basically now they're enemies. This is an enemies to lovers story from that point on. And it was entertaining, but it was probably not my favorite of this particular trope, but still worth picking up. I also read Tanked by Mia Hopkins. This is the 3rd book in the East Side Brewery series. I'm reading a lot of book 3s in this particular wrap up. I have read book 1, I haven't read book 2, but this one I got from NetGalley, so I thought it would be worth picking up because I did enjoy the 1st book. This is the story of Angel, who is the youngest brother of a family who have a brewery, and this brewery has suffered as a result of the pandemic and lockdowns and things like that. And Angel sort of does all of the grunt work and all the little jobs around the place. He's not actually involved in the running of it. He just keeps things going. In order to blow off steam, we find out that he is also involved in underground boxing fights and, often comes home with bruises as a result. Then he crosses paths with Diana, who he had previously had a one-night stand with years ago. And they meet at a vaccination clinic, and there's something still there between the two of them. This is an age gap. Diana is older than Angel. I think it's only like 8 years maybe, but she's the older one in the relationship. She's at a different point in her life. She's just lost her job. She's a social worker, and she truly believes in supporting her community, and yet she's just lost this job that has been, a big part of her identity. So she's in a period of transition, and Angel is trying to prove that he can be more to his brother's business than just the person who does all the odd jobs around this. So this one was really enjoyable. There is consent for days, and it is amazing. And also, Angel is an absolute precious cinnamon roll of a hero. This one's well worth reading. And then I got super excited because Madman by Onley James dropped. This is the 5th book in the Necessary Evil series, and I was so excited for this book. This is the romance series with a family of psychopaths who are all adopted by one man who has been trying to raise them as vigilantes. And in this one, we follow Avi Mulvaney, who is one half of a set of twins in the family. And we've already had Ace's book, who is Avi's twin brother. And he's a sadist, and we find out that Avi is his complete opposite. So they're mirror twins. So Avi is basically the complete opposite in terms of personality. He is a masochist, and he is also this adorable, sunshiny psychopath. Like, it's bizarre. And I remember I was reading it going, I don't know how they're pulling this off, but this is totally working. So the twins together are a really brutally efficient pair, and they basically, you know, they're each one side of a coin. They basically make up a whole. And what we find out is that Thomas, their father, is trying to see how they cope when they're separated from each other. And so he sends Avi on a job to help out one of their other brothers, Aiden. Avi doesn't cope very well when separated from Asa, and so he ends up taking along Felix. And Felix is an intern at Avi's company, which is a sportswear clothing label called Gemini. And Felix is also his brother-in-law through marriage to one of his other brothers. Avi and Felix have this one night stand thing at work on Felix's birthday. And Felix thinks it's one and done because he's the grump in this Grumpy Sunshine romance. And also there's a bit of an age gap between the two of them. But Avi is all in. He's already recognized that Felix is his person and he is determined to win him over. It's kind of adorable in a really weird way to see how he goes about it, because Felix knows that Avi is a psychopath. He knows that he is a vigilante. Felix himself is involved in some of that. Felix and his older brother and their crew have worked as vigilantes in terms of bringing people to justice who the law is not bringing to justice in the past. So they have that in common. But, you know, honestly, I just adored this book so much. I don't even have words to describe it. It was so fun. And I think what I noticed most about this particular series is how much fun Onley James is having writing these characters. And we just see how, you know, we started off with this core family of psychopath brothers who have all found their partners, who have then in turn created this found family dynamic that just expanded the world. And you have so many different personality types, and how they all get along and how they interact is awesome, because they just welcome new people in all the time. And I'm really enjoying it. I'm really excited for the next book, and then hopefully the final book will be Aiden and Thomas's book. And there's a lot of hints in this book towards that, and a lot of references to parent trapping Aiden and Thomas, and I'm here for it. I will say though, if you are not into pain play, blood play, or any of that stuff, be aware of going into this. This is a very bloody book. There's a lot of blood involved. And the final book that I read this week was Blood Heir by Lona Andrews. This was another reread. I did read this just over a month ago, but I wanted to reread it right before the live show, which was on Friday night / Saturday morning. I'm not going to talk too much about this. This is the first book in the Aurelia Rider series, which is the spin-off from the Kate Daniels world. I will leave a link to my previous review last month, as well as the live stream recording link, because you can find out and read all about it there. There's plenty of spoilers and thoughts that I talk about in that particular set of videos. So those are the books that I have read in the last 7 days. In the comments, I would love to know if you have read any of them or if you're planning on picking them up. Otherwise, feel free to let me know something that you have been reading and enjoying, or leave me a knife emoji in the comments to let me know that you're here. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.